Now, today we're going to talk about the FSD Beta update in terms of regulations. But before we get into that topic, I also have something else I can share, because over the past few months, upon initiative of the Tesla Owners Club from the Netherlands, we worked together. I was included as well, together with several Tesla owner clubs, about a dozen or so across Europe, to actually get a list of pressing items for European Tesla drivers. And we have been put on the back burner way too long, and a lot of those things are because of regulations. And that's something that we can't do much about. So that is the second topic for today. But for example, the auto wipers, the auto high beam, that kind of stuff, or the, what else did we talk about? Slowing down before the curves, speed limits, that's a big one. I will come back to that later on as well. Those are the kind of topics. So created a top 10 based on what the users and the drivers thought were the most important things to fix. And those were actually liaised via the Tesla Owner Club Netherlands to Tesla directly, in an effort to actually try to get more animo for us here in Europe to get some improvements, even though we're stuck on the FSD Beta level that we can do for now, but that we still get some improvements, some much needed improvements. They were very happy with that initiative. They were very happy to talk to us all. And we'll see how much of a priority we can make that, so that even though it might still take a while to get FSD here in Europe, we can already have some minor improvements that are still quite annoying, such as the speed limits. So yeah. Hey Michael, welcome. Nice to have you here. I hope you will enjoy this little conversation. Same to you, Fabrice. Hi, welcome to the show. Hi Thomas, nice to see you again as well. Now, before we dive into the FSD Beta, I want to make sure that we all still understand what we are talking about. So FSD Beta is a level 2 system. So even though it's called FSD Full Self-Drive, it's actually full by yourself drive, because it is a level 2 system, which means if you look at the SAE levels here, that you are at any and all times responsible for the behavior of the car. It's not hands-off driving. You have to pay attention. You have to be able to take over at any or all times. Hey Bart, nice to see you here. Thanks for joining. And so that is important to know, that it is called full self-drive. For some, it is interpreted as being full self-drive, but it is a highly advanced level 2 system. Now, when we talk about FSD Beta, on this chart, it's actually not exactly level 2. It's what they call a level 2 plus system. So it is that advanced that it becomes a little bit dangerous, according to the UNECE, that there will be over-reliance on the whole system. And I can agree with that. I catch myself off guard as well, especially on the roads that I know very well, that I'm not as attentive as I would be when I'm driving myself. Now, do you have to be that attentive when the system is that good? According to the regulations, yes, you have to. But if we look at FSD Beta in the US, for example, I'm not saying it's a level 4 system in terms of capabilities, but it's a decent level 3 system already in terms of capabilities. The SAE levels, they only talk about responsibility. So you are responsible for the car, but the car is capable of doing a lot of the driving by itself. So there's a big difference there, but for the law, we only work with the SAE levels. So no cell phones behind the steering wheel if we ever get FSD Beta, of course. Now, why do we suddenly get this progress? Cue the conspiracy theories, I'd say, because BMW, the i5, is getting a preliminary approval or permission for an auto lane change, which is currently not allowed. But just by looking at the mirrors, making that gesture would be enough to say, okay, you're attentive to what is going on. So they don't have to use the steering wheel anymore, looking into the side view mirror, checking if there's a car coming from behind. For the system means that you are attentive enough. VW is closing in on the level 2+ system as well. Tesla FSD Beta has been proven to be really good in the US already, although the whole US thing means that Europe, the UNECE, well, it's not only Europe, we often talk about Europe, but the UNECE is a combination of about 57 countries that span the whole world, right? So it also includes Australia, it also includes South Africa, for example, and yes, it still includes the UK, even though we had the Brexit, because the Brexit only applies to EU, not to the UN. So we have the FSD Beta that has proven in the US to be good. So I guess some kind of pressure is forming there to allow it in Europe as well. Next to the manufacturer pressure, there's also constant user pressure or driver pressure. A lot of the Tesla community is very vocal about getting FSD. In other brands, not so much. But Tesla is known for FSD and trying to reach FSD and to be the first on that level. So a lot of the users, a lot of us are actually quite vocal on social media to get that happening. So also probably that is a factor into this. And maybe they finally see that the benefits outweigh the risks at this point. Now, something to keep in mind when I'm going to tell today about the timeline and about the content, it's still in draft mode, and the timeline is a proposal that was made. So it's not yet carved in stone that this will actually happen. This is a proposal that makes a lot of us happy, but we still have to hope that this proposal will be accepted and everything will run according to that schema. If we talk about requirements, so what is required for they're basically splitting up FSD or the level 2+ system. They're splitting up in two things. One is the hands-on system. The second one is the hands-off system, which is geared more towards, it's still FSD Beta. It's still a level 2 system, but you can use the camera for detection of attentiveness, for the side view mirrors, that kind of stuff. Now it's still hands-on, so you will have to confirm using a wiggle of the steering wheel, for example, to or the touch of a button, the scroll of a button, some kind of hands-on feedback for the system to know that you are attentive. Now in this first thing, they say the manufacturer needs to use a proven, effective method of detecting the driver attentiveness. So the steering wheel wiggle is definitely something that is proven, because we've been using it for 6-7 years already, and that still works. What else is an important one, and I mentioned it before, is that the system needs to be capable to read and adhere to the required speed limits. And that's a big one. And it's not only for Tesla. My wife's Audi is also wrong a lot of the time, but it's more right than the Tesla system. And on the Tesla system, I see sometimes that it reads the sign correctly, but it doesn't apply it to autopilot. So there is definitely a big improvement that Tesla needs to make to be able to qualify for this particular system or for this particular certification to get to FSD Beta. Hey Archie, welcome to the channel. Nice to have you here. Now, what also is a requirement is that the system shall detect other road users and vulnerable road users. So it needs to detect the pedestrians, it needs to detect cyclists, and it needs to kind of predict the path that they are going to take. So if a pedestrian is coming towards a crossing, then the car should anticipate that this pedestrian might be crossing. And this is something that I see in my car all the time. If a pedestrian or a cyclist is waiting at a traffic light and they're just moving their bicycle while they're holding that pole, for example, and they're just waiting at the light and they're a little bit too close to the edge of the road, then my car will actually slam on the brakes thinking that that cyclist is going to cross the road. So we already get that covered pretty much. That's definitely a good one. Now when we talk to the lane changes, right now it's a manual lane change, a driver initiated lane change. Now what we can do is, or what we can get is an automatic lane change. Let me just quickly go over how it currently works. So the driver first has to initiate the lane change by applying the blinker. Then the car needs to wait for 1 second before it can start moving. Then within the next 2 seconds, so between 3 and 5 seconds, so it's a very small window and it cannot be before 3 or after 5, it needs to cross the dotted line with the front tire. And then it has like 5 seconds to complete the entire lane change maneuver. That is what it is currently like. And as we all know, it doesn't work that well because you need a big gap. I will talk about the gap later on as well. And yeah, it's just too slow. You have to time it right, because if the blinker is on for too long, for more than 7 seconds before the actual lane crossing, then it will actually get you back into your lane and the lane change will be cancelled. So that is something that Tesla via Avere, the overarching car company representatives, let me call it like that, have been trying to apply or to increase that speed limit, that time limit there. And so far it has been shut down. Now a lot of this will be automatically done and fixed once the car can decide how to make that lane change and when to initiate the blinker. It can guess the distance, initiate the blinker at the right time, and everything will be solved. So that is something that hopefully the automatic lane change will automatically fix. Now when they talk about lane changes, a lot has changed because we're also talking about lane changes outside of highways. Right now it's only allowed on highways and roads where there's a physical divider between the two directions, and there's a physical divider or actually no bicycles are allowed or pedestrians are allowed on that road. So basically highways and major motorways. Right now we are talking about city streets as well. So that includes a lot of new scenarios, like for example, can the car actually perform a lane change to pass a stopped vehicle? Can it perform a lane change to pass a slower vehicle? Yes or no? And that's a big question at this point, because the ETSC, which is the European Transport Safety Council, which is like the counterpart for NHTSA, is saying, okay, there's a reason why the car in front of you is slowing down. Maybe there's a traffic jam in front of it. So wouldn't be a good idea at that point to actually try to overtake that car, especially if you have a road with one lane in each direction. So yeah, that might be kind of a downside here, but they are thinking about the right things because they are not prohibiting it altogether. They're just saying, okay, we have to think of certain cases where it's useful and certain cases where it could be dangerous. Yeah, so again, the driver needs to be attentive. The driver needs to give some input to make sure that he is attentive, and that is still remaining the same. No eyes-on system and hands-off system, for example. So that will be for 2024. What we're talking about is hopefully going to come to us, 2025. What we're talking about here today is hopefully coming to us in 2024, if all goes well. Now, the time between the lane change procedure, the start of the maneuver, could be extended to 10 seconds. But then again, there's some comments about leaving the blinker on too long. If the system initiates it and it doesn't make the maneuver anyway, in some countries apparently that could be illegal. So we have an additional difficulty compared to the US, in the sense that we have a lot of tiny countries here, a few big ones as well. but each country has its own local regulations, local laws. And that makes it difficult to make the common denominator or to have them change the laws to be like the overarching common ground to have. So I think the first one will be a lot easier to have a common denominator, like the most strict rules, those are the ones that are going to be applied, instead of having every country change their laws to be a lot bigger. Now, if we go back to level 3, level 4 in the future, then definitely the local laws will have to be adjusted. Multiple lane changes, also a big one that's actually mentioned in the draft document. So you can do multiple lane changes automatically as well with a continuous blinker, which you can't do manually right now. Well, semi-manually, of course, but each individual lane change needs to be an individual lane change. So even though the blinker can stay on the whole time, it needs to move one lane over, then it needs to move a second lane over, wait a little bit, needs to move to the third lane, for example. And that is something that could happen with a continuous blinker, but it will be in steps instead of in one smooth motion, which I think is only logical, especially if you think that a car could be coming from behind in the third lane and you're still in the first lane. You're not going to swoop directly into that third lane. I know some people do, but it's not really safe to actually do that. Hey Teslink, welcome. Thank you. I'm happy to do this session for you. I love to dive deep into these nitty-gritty details and make it more approachable for the most people. So yeah, thanks for that. Still, one of the issues that we have is the gap. All right. So let me explain to you with the example here. So you're driving at 120 kilometers an hour. A car approaches from behind doing 130 in the next lane over, and you want to switch lanes. That means that, I'm not going through the calculations, but that means that you need to have a gap of at least 36 meters. Now, I've put this into perspective. This is the kind of gap that you need. So that's 7 car lengths that you actually need behind you. And of course, there is only one problem with that system. Reality, because this is the actual reality that we have. So that is why, especially in busier traffic, it's almost impossible to use the auto lane change that we currently have. The same will go for the actual auto lane change that we might have with FSD Beta, but it needs to be able to be more aggressive. And yeah, with that aggressiveness, it is kind of included into the draft document as well, because when they talk about the draft, or they talk about this specific scenario in the draft document, they actually say, okay, this is the minimum distance that you need, but there can be exceptions for dense traffic. And they give the example of urban driving. Especially in urban driving, you never will have a gap that big, which is only logical in such an environment. But maybe, and they don't mention it in the draft specifically, but maybe this also leaves room for interpretation for dense traffic on highways. Fingers crossed, it will actually be able to be a lot more swift in the lane changes than what it is doing now. Also right now, something that the car does is it will stay in the same speed or at the same speed as the car in front of you when it moves to the side. And only then, when the car is completely cleared from view, it will start accelerating. If you're a normal driver and you want to do a lane change, you will actually accelerate into the lane change. And I believe that in the US, this is actually happening already. So that is exactly what we need here as well, to be more fluent in traffic and to have fluid traffic at the same time. Another point that they, and I'm a huge favor of this one, is training and education. In the draft document, they actually speak about the manufacturer needing to provide training and education. Now, this can be videos, for example, and I don't know how severe they will go in the training and education thing, but too many people think that FSD is actually full self-drive and it's a self-driving car. They even think that at this point with autopilot, and it's not. And we have to be careful with that, especially in terms of the regulations. We need to be aware that when this will be released, whether it is Tesla, whether it is Mercedes, whether it is VW, or any other company that will actually release this kind of features, they will be scrutinized. They will have, the system will be tested. The system will be evaluated independently. They will have to be certified as a manufacturer for that specific system. And rest assured that at that point, when it is released, any accident that will happen with any of those cars will be scrutinized and will be tried to be blamed as FSD is the culprit of this particular accident, for example. Now let's hope that's not the case, of course. Let's hope that we benefit from what has been happening in the US and we get a pretty good system from the get-go. But again, the US is different from the EU or from South Africa, from Australia. So yeah, we don't know whether we will start from zero again with a small select group of people that can have the FSD beta at first, and then it will grow just like we did in the US, or whether it will be a big rollout from the start. I'm guessing it will be the first, and hopefully I'm one of the first to be able to get this system on my car. Now, in terms of training, I don't know how far they will actually go. So they speak about videos, but they also speak about specific terms. They actually mention training. And yeah, I don't know if they have like a pop quiz in the car that you need to take, and if you fail the quiz, then FSD cannot be enabled, something like that. I have no clue how they will do it. And that brings me to another term as well, because FSD will probably not be the name that is used here in Europe, because also in the draft there is specific mention that the system or the advertisement for the system cannot leave interpretation to assume that it is something that it is not. So by calling it full self-driving, too many people believe that it is actually an autonomous car. And I don't know, will they call it Drive Assist Plus or something like that? I have no idea how they will handle that at Tesla. But FSD is probably not going to remain the name, at least not in Europe. And of course, what's in a name? For me, it's a double-edged sword. On the one hand, I'm like, yeah, okay, but you pay $15,000 right now in the US for the feature. If you don't read into what you're buying for that kind of money, you may have other issues. But on the other hand, of course, there's something to say for the fact that if you name something, it actually means exactly word for word what it is. And yeah, I mean, it's up for debate. I'm in the camp of it's only a name and read into what you are buying. But I am biased on that front because I actually read into what I'm buying. So yeah, that is a little bit one way or the other. You can't please everybody, of course. Something else that they do next to lane changes is system-initiated maneuvers that are specifically mentioned, which is roundabouts, multi-lane roundabouts, even U-turns are included in the regulations. Departing and arriving at parking positions. So that is definitely something. It's not going to be a full self-parking system at that point. We won't get smart summon in that front, the way it is in the US, where you can do it from 100 meters away, for example, because you still need to supervise the car at any and all times. Yeah, Mark, that's actually a good suggestion. Supervised full self-driving. It is indeed supervised and or supervised advanced driving, car driving, something like that. Yeah, definitely a good option to name it like that. Passing slower moving road users, that is something that is also allowed, including cyclists and pedestrians, and given enough room. So we have to leave officially, I think, like 1.5 meters between the cyclist and the pedestrian and the car if you want to pass them. And of course, following the GPS to make directions to turn at intersections and those kinds of things. So basically, it is describing what full self-drive is, the beta at least in the US. So that is definitely awesome. Now, as for timeline, this is directly from the documents. I have linked the documents below in the description of this video as well. So the schedule for the proposal of prioritization. So they want to split it up into hands-on and hands-off. The hands-on system, I just explained what that would include. And they aim for a submission in June 2023. So that's already in, actually it's next month. Yeah, it's already next month. Damn, time flies. I was going to say in 2-3 months, but yeah, it's next month already. So yeah, hopefully that will go there. That's the GRVA. So they submitted to that council. It's kind of a council where it can be voted upon. And if that is accepted, then it still needs to go to the WP29, which is the Working Party 29. But that is just an administrative step. It's hardly ever that something is held back at that point. It's more like, okay, we need to include this in the next release of our documents. If all of this is accepted, and that's a big if, because the timeline is indeed really short and there are a lot of open questions still at this point. But if it is accepted, then we may get the opportunity to have FSD Beta as soon as January 2024, because the regulations usually take effect in January, the year after they were submitted or voted upon. So that is definitely good prospect. But again, it's a proposal. It's not yet a certainty that this is the way it will happen. If the submission in June is not ready in time, then it will probably be postponed to September. And then it will be difficult to get it in January still. Now, yeah, it's definitely something to look forward to. And oh yeah, that's something that I wanted to mention as well. For the submission in June, to be able to attain that, the meetings have been increased to bi-weekly at this point. So they really want to make work of this as well. I don't know what has kicked them, as I said at the beginning. Maybe there's something from the Germans that are pushing way harder. Maybe it's the combination of all the different car manufacturers that are pushing together. We will never know, probably, because it's a very close group and it's very hard to get direct information from the participants because they are all under a very heavy NDAs also. But yeah, it is what it is, and hopefully this will lead us to some good news, and I will definitely keep you posted once that will happen. Let's see here. FSD is as a teenager, he must do things, but apparently we are still responsible. Yeah, and some compare it, especially the first versions, to FSD being like a 16-year-old driver, still learning to drive, still making mistakes, but you are responsible for the mistakes and you need to be able to intervene to avoid accidents. So definitely I am really in favor of educating people in letting them know what it can do, what it can't do. So the very detailed release notes that people in the US are getting on what is fixed, how some things work, how some things don't work, I really appreciate that. And people need to read that. And especially the first beta testers that will be in a very small group, perhaps a few people in each country. That will definitely be the group that needs to be selected to be people that will read that, will actively test it, will actively participate in making things a lot better. So yeah, hey Mark, thanks for the appreciation. It's very much appreciated on my side as well. Any questions about FSD in general, about the regulation in general? Because this is kind of where we are at. It's been since 2019 that the regulations have been applied, which is the R79. That was the beginning of everything. I made a video about that in August that year, about all the limitations that we are getting because of those regulations that suddenly applied. And ever since, we had some minor updates, but mostly regression in the Tesla system. And I think that's very sad to have that. You know that you have such a capable car, but it is being held back purely by the governments, purely by the regulations, and it could do so much more. And I agree, on the one hand, it is a dangerous time at this point when people start trusting the system way too much. But on the other hand, if you're not deploying the system, you're not gaining the experience. Just look at Tesla having so many cars on the road, having so much more data than anyone else out there. They can train their models, they can adjust their models really quickly. And especially with Dojo coming up, they will have turnaround times for the neural networks that are pushed to our cars to do it within a matter of days, so to speak. David, looks like hardware 3 SNX will never be hands-off driving then. My Plaid is a hardware 3, so I know what you mean, but it's not in general. With no interior camera, probably not. Will Tesla have to do an update on that? Will they have to upgrade your car to include that? Well, they actually promised what is FSD Beta and not full hands-off driving at this point. It's in the small print that it needs to be supervised. It also is depending on software validation and regulatory approval, also in the fine print. So they don't have to do that. And you will still be able to get auto lane changes just by nudging it a little bit, but you won't have to initiate the lane change. The car will say, well, hey, I want to change lanes. The way it does now, it suggests a lane change. And then it says, okay, you need to initiate. Then it will also initiate that lane change, but you have to confirm it. The same with hands-off driving. You will have to still confirm it at this point, because you will have to look in the side view mirror, for example, or use the steering wheel or some kind of other method that is yet to be determined. But hands-off driving in legacy cars, I don't think that is going to happen, and I don't think that Tesla will include or change the entire wiring harness to include an additional interior camera. Maybe I'm wrong, but I don't think so. No. All right. So if there are no more questions, I would like to thank you very much. If you like this video and you like this kind of content, don't forget to like it and subscribe. Thank you for those that already have done that. Thank you for joining, and I will see you guys in the next one. Oh, let me see. Bart says another one. Tesla also has a safety score. You have to do above 80% before you get FSD Beta. I'm not sure about that at the moment. I thought the safety score was taken off. You had to have like above 95 at first, and then they lowered it to 90, eventually to 80 before you could get FSD. But with the wide rollout, I think you actually don't need the safety score anymore. Anyone else from the US here present that can confirm or deny what I just said? Just leave it in the comment. I would be curious to see if it's completely gone, which I think it is, or not. Yeah, exactly. Patrick confirms there is no safety score anymore. Everybody gets FSD Beta without the safety score. Also, one of the problems that I do have with the whole safety score is that you get dinged quite a lot for nighttime driving. A lot of people do night shifts. They get dinged all the time just because they do night shifts. And the system is set up to say, okay, you'll be drowsy in the evening, you'll be tired, but those people just wake up, basically. I think there should be a better system, and hopefully that will actually come then. Theodore, do you think Tesla would prioritize rolling out UNECE countries ASAP? I can see many hurdles and roadblocks set up by UNECE, favoring European cars, driving hardware 3 Model S 2018. You're driving a good car. I love the Model S. It's a difficult one. The Germans are strong in this one. They have 3 big brands, actually kind of 4, but I don't think Porsche is doing much for autonomy. I don't know what the status is with Rimac Automobili, or Bugatti Rimac, I need to say now, with the Nevera, because they also are going for fully autonomous driving, but I have no update on that specific car, where they are at. I know it can do track laps, and it can be like a driver coach in that front. But then again, BMW had a system like that many years ago, where it could learn the track and then drive the track as a race car, kind of. But you have Audi, VW, Mercedes. They are definitely in there. Nissan is also, with their ProPilot system, is also been pushing quite a bit for the past few years. So they will continue to push as well. But we cannot deny that at this point, Tesla is the furthest ahead when it comes to general semi-autonomous driving. So it would surprise me if they actually favor the Germans. That would be like discrimination, and in Europe we have laws against that. So yeah, we'll see. But then it becomes a game of lawyers and all that kind of stuff. I'm not sure if Tesla wants to go that road as well, but yeah, we'll see. Hey Geir, thanks for the comment, much appreciated. David, hardware 4 has fewer front cameras in the windscreen, so they could design a new mounting for hardware 4 camera. Use third camera feed for the internal camera. Yeah, but the cameras are way different. They're much higher resolution, and probably the hardware 3 computer will not be capable of handling those as well, and there will be a separate hardware 4 computer needed as well. That's quite a big change to do, but in theory it's all possible. They can change the entire wiring harness for the car, but Elon already mentioned that they will not retrofit the hardware 4 on hardware 3. Now Elon does mention quite a bit, and he sometimes has to come back on his word as well, so we'll have to wait and see, but I don't think it's going to happen either. John, how big a problem will be right-hand drive cars? I'm in the UK with the FSD option. Part of the driving is actually programmed. There are some regulations that need to be programmed in. Those are not AI. Most of the driving is done by AI. The line detection done by AI. The fact that you have to drive on the left side of the road, that is not AI. That is a local regulation that needs to be built in. Because if I cross the channel, come back to Belgium, I have to drive on the right side again. So it needs to have geographical knowledge of where the car is and what the local regulations are. So I don't think there's going to be much difference between left-hand and right-hand drive cars. The same with autopilot. It's doing it perfectly on both sides. And I believe, I'm not sure with navigated autopilot, but I believe with regular autopilot, it kind of came out at the same time. So they take that into account. So I wouldn't be too worried that you guys will be left out for another year or two, maybe. The camera positions are the same. It's just some local regulations about left and right that that need to be adjusted, and especially reading of the different signs. The speed signs are different in the UK than in France, than in Belgium, even a tiny bit more different than in the Netherlands, for example. In Germany, you have the unlimited speed with autopilot going up to 150 kph maximum at the moment. Maybe they will increase that as well, maybe they won't, maybe they will decrease it with FSD to just do 130, for example, which is the advised speed limit in Germany. We will have to see how they will handle all those individual countries, and as I mentioned, that makes it a little bit more difficult, I think quite a bit more difficult for Europeans to have the FSD beta compared to the US, where There are also differences, but the differences are minor compared to the differences that we have in the US. All right, so thank you again for joining me. As mentioned, if there's another update, probably after the June session, maybe in between, I will keep a much closer eye right now on the documents. You can do it as well. As I said, I mentioned the links down below where you can find the reports. Usually the reports, they appear a week or two to a month after the actual session has happened. So if they have the June session and it will be approved, then probably there will be a blog post by the UNECE like we had with the level 4, for example, or the level 3 that was allowed in Germany. But other than that, it's just waiting and seeing each day, has the report been published, yes or no, because that is our only source right now because of the heavy NDAs to get the knowledge about what is going on that front. Okay, Frederick, so apparently 140 kph without the radar. Okay, they probably will increase that as well. I remember back in the day when I just had Autopilot 2 on my P100D, it was actually limited to 90 kilometers an hour, and we didn't even have a traffic assisted cruise control. So it was just a regular cruise control that would bang into the car in front of you. Well, good questions that you guys have. Do you think there will be assistance for emergency corridors in traffic jams? Oh yeah, sure. I forgot to mention that. That is also included in the draft. There are currently like 7 countries already in Europe where this is mandatory to do. And yes, it is included in the capability of the car leaving the lane to create an emergency corridor. The virtual rescue lane, as it is called as well. That is included, and that will be tested. So it will be mandatory to have that. Again, that's a change that Tesla will have to implement because currently they can't do that, which renders autopilot in a lot of countries at the moment completely useless in a traffic jam where it should have the most use of all. But yeah, definitely coming. Phantom braking, send bug reports when facing phantom braking or other issues. No, unfortunately not. Some say that you can do a bug report via the voice command. You can say bug report or note and then just note something. But this is actually not going anywhere. It just stays in the car and it is only read when you take your car in for service and you specifically ask service to read the messages, or the same with the screenshots that you can take by just pressing the car icon on the big screen for a long time. You will get a message, thank you for the feedback, but the feedback is only staying in the car and service center needs to read that feedback. So no, Twitter is your only chance to get some venting on phantom braking and that kind of stuff, or the Tesla Motor Club forums, where if enough people do that, maybe Tesla notices that as well. But there's no official channel for bug reports. This is also something that I've been trying to get with Tesla, is to have some kind of community manager and some kind of community professional. When I worked for an Adobe Authorized Training Center, I was also a community professional for Adobe. And there we had direct access to the development team. We had direct access to Jira, to log bugs, and you had to be qualified to become a community professional. So you were screened very heavily, actually, to be able to get into that program. And then you were kind of the spokesperson for the community, for your local community. And I think Tesla should do something similar with some trusted people that they say, okay, they will not bother us with the tiny bits, like the door is not shutting properly, something like that, but the real bugs are filtered out and they will reach the actual development teams. Yeah, maybe one day they will do that, but again, Tesla is not into marketing much. They don't have much budget for it. They do marketing, of course. They don't advertise, but they do marketing. But they don't spend a lot of money on doing that. So I'm afraid that is a dead end, but it would be a good thing to have like a community manager and a regional community manager, and then some community professionals in each country, maybe 2 or 3 people that can gather the data and then send it along. This is what the Tesla owner clubs are now kind of doing. Some clubs are more active than others. In Europe, there are quite a bit of active clubs, but there are also quite a bit of dormant clubs. So it's not always that, so you need somebody that actually takes up that responsibility. Yeah, Patrick, really hope Tesla will one day allow transfer FSD to a new car. Yes, I bought it with my Model S Plaid again, but that was 2.5 years ago. Because back then there was also some progress being made. I was hoping that by now we should have a little bit of progress already, but unfortunately that's not the case. But maybe next year, then my car is only 1 year old, before I will actually have some use for the FSD package that I bought with this car. I also have the intention to keep this car a bit longer. I had it stealth wrapped as well, which is quite the expense to make on the car, but it gives a different look as well, and I really like it. But the idea is to keep it at least like 5, 6, maybe 7 years. Hopefully by then it will actually mean something to have FSD. All right, let's wrap it up here. Again, thank you very much. If you like the t-shirt, you can always support the channel by going to the web shop and buying a t-shirt there. It would be very much appreciated as well. And for now, I'd like to thank you very much for attending, very much for your comments and your questions as well. There's some good questions in there. And I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye-bye.